Now, there are some points in time where a producer out there in Hollywood has to take an original property made for children and turn it into a live-action movie that's supposed to be dark, gritty, and realistic. Particularly the last 3 Transformers movies, and even Battleship, and that was based on a board game. Sometimes, every once in a while, they get it right. Same thing with comic book movies. If you take an interesting property from a very good source material and turn it into a live-action movie and make it fun, then you're gold. However, if you don't, you kinda wind up with movies like this, where you turn a very charismatic and lighthearted character into a brooding, dark superhero, and that just really doesn't fit well. And that's basically what we're getting with this new Power Rangers movie. Now for me, I don't know if you grew up with the Power Rangers, but for me, I have. Hopefully I have the same opinion about it when I look back on it, but still, as a kid, I enjoyed it. And now we are here with a really dark and gritty reboot of the Power Rangers. And you know what? I basically think it boils down to this. Power Rangers is not a terrible movie, but it's definitely not a movie that I'm gonna go out and watch again. I'm pretty sure fans of the Power Rangers are gonna get a kick out of this, but to be honest, I'm just not that guy. So what we have in this movie is that there are these 5 teenagers who find these mystical items that basically turn them into superheroes, where they have John Carter-like jumping distance, superhuman strength, and they have unique fighting moves and choreography. And basically it's up to these Power Rangers to defeat an evil sorceress named Rita Repulsa, played completely over the top by Elizabeth Banks, from unleashing a giant monster onto their town named Goldar. Now, while Power Rangers has its massive flaws, I'll start off with the stuff I liked about the movie, because surprisingly there are a few. For example, some of the Rangers in this movie I really enjoyed, mostly because their character works, they're relatable, and they're interesting. And once you see that character, you're like, yeah, I feel like that character. You have the Black Ranger dealing with something really tragic in his life. You have the Yellow Ranger being hassled by her family because of her sexual orientation. And perhaps my biggest standout of the movie, the Blue Ranger. He's kind of the quiet kid who sits in the back of class who basically keeps to himself. He's kind of nerdy and quirky, and the biggest surprise of them all, he's on the autistic spectrum. And the reason why I connected with this character is because I was that guy. I was the quiet kid who sit in the back of class. And to be completely honest, I'm not even making this up, I was on the autism spectrum. So you can honestly see why I kind of relate to that guy. And as much as these 3 Rangers that I listed out are very interesting, the problem is that they barely get any screen time. Most of the time we're focused with the Red Ranger and the Pink Ranger, who are completely one note and uninteresting. And yes, some of the action is a bit cheesy and enjoyable to watch at points. But there is one problem I do have with some of the action scenes, and we'll get to that later. And perhaps the biggest compliment I can say is that it's not insulting. It's not like Transformers where it basically takes a property and completely craps all over it. It knows what it wants to be, and I'm fine with that. However, what I'm not fine with are some of the issues I have with it. Like, for example, the tone. The tone for this movie is completely all over the place. For the first 2/3 of the movie, it's supposed to be like this dark, gritty, and mature and realistic reboot. However, the tone automatically turns on a dime, and it just becomes a typical episode of the Power Rangers show. And basically, the tone can affect some of the characters. Like, for example, the villain. The movie is supposed to be a dark, gritty, realistic reboot, but you have Elizabeth Banks, who plays Rita Repulsa, playing her completely over the top, like a cartoon, having her act out like a character from the show. And you know some of the issues I have with some of the action sequences? Yeah, let's talk about them. Basically, my biggest problem with some of the action sequences, it's not because of its laughably dull visual effects, but it's because the final act of this movie is basically a commercial for Krispy Kreme donuts. Yes, there is an entire plot point that has to do with Krispy Kreme donuts. Can you see what I mean by the tone not working in this movie? And I'm also not making this up. They go out of their way to have a character eat a donut in front of the camera. Yep. Basically, the final act of the movie felt like a Transformers action scene or the Smallville fight for Man of Steel. But no, the product placement in this movie is not as bad as Man of Steel's. Yeah, as you probably can tell, I'm not a big Man of Steel fan. But for me, the ultimate problem with this movie is, who is this movie made for? I can't recommend it to kids because they have to wait through an hour and a half, yes, the entire length of the last Power Rangers movie, of just boring stuff that kids aren't gonna care for, but I can't recommend it to teenagers or adults because it's a premise meant for 5-year-olds. Possibly I can recommend this movie to Power Rangers fans, but I guess it's just only people who are just big-time fans of the Power Rangers. Now for me, like I said before, Power Rangers is not a really terrible movie, but it's a movie that I'm just not gonna really go out of my way to recommend to anybody. I mean, heck, I'm a Power Rangers fan, and I don't even like this movie. So ultimately for me, I have to give Power Rangers a 2 out of 5. Alright guys, that is my review of Power Rangers. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Google+. And also, be sure to subscribe for more. My name is Luke Nukem, and you have been blown away.